So there's an old saying, and it's one of my favorites. Outline your life in pencil, not pen. Things change. Opportunities arise. Don't be rigid. Keep your eyes open. And I know Sam Darnold was supposed to be like a one-year thing, but he is so good with Justin Jefferson. He is so clutch in the fourth quarter. This is no longer just a good story. This is an excellent team, and he is an excellent quarterback. This isn't the 27 Vikings. Remember that? Pre-Kirk Cousins. Case Keenum, 13 wins. Case had 22 touchdowns. Sam's got 32 and counting. And he's 8-1 in one-score games. He has just been so good. And quarterbacks are either trucks, where they're pulling the team, or they're trailers, where they're being pulled. Sam's a truck. He's pulling this team. They lost their excellent left tackle, one of the best in the game, maybe the best in the game. They lost him. Sam's like, we good, 8-0 without him. That fourth quarter game-winning drive encapsulates all of Sam Darnold. The athletic ability, the toughness, making big throws in big moments. There is no denying he is helping pull this team. I'm not denying the receiving corps is good. Kevin O'Connell's an amazing. They call him the tall Sean McVay. But this is not the Case Keenum team. This is not just a guy that comes in and we all kind of fall in love with the story. Vegas had these guys at 6 wins. That's what Vegas had them at. 6 wins. This is not a great roster. Detroit, when healthy, great roster. Philadelphia, great roster. Buffalo, really, really good roster. Baltimore, excellent roster. This roster is pretty good. But Darnold's toughness, his coachability, his playmaking, that last drive, man, that's something else. And again, lost their left tackle. Wasn't perfect. This team could still be the number 1 seed. Number 1 seed. And I know you drafted J.J. McCarthy. I get it. And I know you brought in Daniel Jones. Understood. But to me, you got to franchise tag him at minimum. You can't let him go. What if he ends up somewhere along the way and comes back to beat you? And maybe this is the best Sam could ever be. And I'm not going to deny that Justin Jefferson, there's one in the league. And Kevin O'Connell is an excellent young coach. And Minnesota's always been a pretty well-run franchise. I'm not denying that. But outline your life in pencil. Plans change. Opportunities arise. Employees are better than you think. And I'm not saying it's just Sam. This offense got real players, but they lost their left tackle. I've seen other quarterbacks, rhymes with Brock Purdy, lose a left tackle or a running back and shrink. Not slinging Sammy Darnold. Another win. Still a number 1 seed is viable. And here's the coach after.
There wasn't really one guy, and I know I'm not speaking for myself. I thought we were going to go down and we were going to get a touchdown. And I think the level of confidence that group has in their quarterback and the level of confidence the quarterback has in the 10 guys in the huddle is significant. And that's how you're able to go do that in that moment on the road at this place. You can't hear yourself think. It's pretty fantastic, performance in that moment by, not just our quarterback, but all 11 of those guys out there.
Slinging Sammy Darnold. It took a while, but he's special. So I don't want to overreact. Mondays, off a crazy football weekend, it becomes overreaction Monday. I don't want to overreact to the Eagles losing to Washington. Okay, Jalen Hurts, very early, got a concussion. It's not the same team. It's a great roster, but it is a quarterback league. And I'm not going to overreact because Jayden Daniels, as a rookie, threw 5 touchdown passes. The bigger story is why the NFL is king, because you get the right coach and the right rookie quarterback, you draft the right guy, and you can go from an NFL embarrassment for over a decade to the playoffs in 3 months. And that's what you're seeing. Jayden Daniels does not have a great roster. He's got one big-time weapon. But you can see some Lamar Jackson. You can see the poise. You could see 10 to 15 years of playoffs. I mean, I grew up, and they had a different name, but this was a great franchise. I've said before that the Washington football franchise reminds me of the Golden State Warriors. I grew up in the 70s, And Washington, the football team, and Golden State, the basketball team, had legendary players, and you could argue they had the best fan bases. But mismanagement or bad ownership, and the Warriors just sort of regress into irrelevant, even on the West Coast, and then it all turns around with Steph Curry. In Washington, the George Allen Washington team, 1972 Super Bowl, this Joe Gibbs, I mean, this was for a long time. This was tough and physical, and the Hogs, and then Dan Snyder, and as we always say on this show, ownership. Bad teams all have one thing in common, and it's not a bad coach, and it's not a bad quarterback. Cincinnati, I think, has a good coach and a great quarterback. It's usually upstairs. But all you need is the right coach and the right quarterback, and finally they got a bad owner out and a great owner in, and you're looking at playoffs. That final drive, what was great about that, not just the 3 fourth-quarter touchdowns by Jayden Daniels. He threw a pick on the previous drive. So what? Unfazed. Cut it loose. Didn't care. Very Andrew Luck. Very short memory. And this rookie quarterback class, by the way, we may have 5 for 5. I watched Penix this weekend. That dude's good. So obviously the Jalen Hurts concussion can change the outcome. But here's what's amazing about this kid. And I've said this before. The difference between the haves and the have-nots at quarterbacks. When are you good? Okay, when are you good? Do you lose a left tackle, Sam Darnold? You go 8-0. It can't just be when everything's great. When are you good? This kid has a 106 passer rating while trailing. That's like GOAT stuff. Okay, that's Mahomes early. Mahomes was better trailing. You could never tell if Mahomes was leading or trailing. You could never tell. A lot of quarterbacks in this league with protection, they're leading. They all look great thrown on 2nd and 2. Jayden Daniels has a good O-line. It's better. They got Cliff Kingsbury and the offensive staff have done a nice job. It's a better O-line, top 7 or 8. It's not Detroit. It's not Philly. It's probably not Atlanta, but it's good. But he's got a great passer rating trailing and 115 passer rating in the fourth quarter. That is unheard of for a rookie. Those numbers, this is not September. We're not early October. We're now late December. Like, that's who the kid is. And this is probably the worst roster he plays with, at least while he's on his rookie contract, right? And once they pay him the big money, you got to make concessions. But for the next 2 to 3 years, he's not making any money. So this roster's only going to get better. This kid is nails, fourth quarter, trailing. And I know Jalen Hurts was out. But if you're doing things now in late December, in chilly weather, against the number 1 defense in the league and driving down, that last drive was art, baby. That's what the great ones look like. That is GOAT stuff. And we said, everybody on this show loved him. J-Mac loved him. I loved him coming out of college. But he is better than I thought early. And here he is after.
I always believe that we can win the game no matter what. The game's never over till the clock hits 0. I think you live for these type of moments. You got those guys that came in on the win streak they were on. They were hot. And they're a very good team, rightfully so. Good offense, good defense, all around, well-prepared team. And you want to go out there, see where you match, and you match up against those type of guys.
Got to tell you, sometimes I feel so lucky to do this for a living. I'm watching all these young quarterbacks. Penix looks poised. Jayden is money. Caleb hasn't thrown a pick in forever, since like Halloween. Bo Nix, I think he and Sean Payton work. I don't know about J.J. McCarthy, but Drake May yesterday, I'm like, oh, dude can play. I mean, I think we did a 5 for 5. I mean, Penix, even when Penix was throwing the ball away yesterday, he was good. But none of them have been consistently as good trailing and in the fourth quarter as Jayden Daniels. This is an exciting time. I mean, for a Washington franchise, I'm telling you, it was the Warriors for a long time. They were great in the 70s, talk about the 80s, and all of a sudden you're like, post-Joe Gibbs, it's like, what's going on here? Bad ownership. I'd love to see Washington, 15-year run with this kid. Can you imagine having Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, and right around the corner having Jayden Daniels basically kind of like the duplicate? He's a little better in the pocket than early Lamar. Maybe not as electric running quite as Lamar. What a rivalry. This could be, even though one's NFC, one's AFC, that just be fantastic for the league. Because we know the New York teams, you can't trust them as big East Coast markets to do anything. So why not get Baltimore and Washington? J-Mac, when I was a kid, my favorite team was Washington, 1972. George, I can name the whole team. Pat Fisher, Chris Hanberger, Tyrone Talbert, Larry Brown, Billy Kilmer. It's my favorite team, and they were great. And they had a big rivalry with the Cowboys, and weren't very good for a while. And here comes Joe Gibbs, and they were great, right? And so for you growing up, you're younger than me, you probably remember the Joe Gibbs.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I was living in Northern Virginia at the time, and I was not a Washington, at the time, Redskins fan. I was a Jets guy, of course, because I had to keep true to my New York roots.
But people often forget, if you're in your 20s, how great this franchise's history was.
80s and 90s?
There was a time,
dominant.
There was a time in the 70s, I remember them used to, 70s and the 80s, they had like a 30-year waiting list for season tickets.
That's right. Yeah.
They would talk about that on TV all the time, the waiting list for tickets. But bad ownership, corrosive ownership, it can sink even the greatest fans. So as I watch Washington, it just brings back all these 70s, 80s, and some 90s stuff, how great this franchise was.
That was a great game yesterday. Yep. And there'll be likely a rematch in the first round of the playoffs between these two. We shall see.
Yeah.